Welcome to Leadership Rediscovered. I'm your host, Laura Siebold, and today I am thrilled to be joined by Mindy Jimison. Mindy is a senior principal at ALULA. ALULA, which is formerly known as the Continuous Learning Group, or CLG, is a management consultancy focused on understanding how human behavior influences business performance. Mindy has 15 years of experience partnering with and advising senior leaders and executives on large-scale transformation efforts. She works across varied industries, including oil and gas, manufacturing, construction, pharmaceutical, and healthcare. Her specialties include change leadership, global transformation design and execution, leadership and team alignment, executive coaching, and leadership development. Mindy earned her Master's of Science in Integrated Marketing Communications from West Virginia University and her Bachelor of Arts in Media and Public Communication with a psychology minor, which is very important in the work she does, from Purdue University. Go Boilermakers. Mindy knows firsthand that leadership alignment and preparing the people responsible for driving change are critical to success and getting business results. Mindy Jimison, thank you for being here. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you for having me. I'm a fan of your podcast, and thank you for asking me. I've really enjoyed learning from all of the different leaders that you've had.
Oh, that's awesome. And now people get to learn from you. And I had the pleasure of actually getting to work with you for a few years. So I know your talents firsthand and got to see you in action, which was great. But for those who don't know you yet, would you be willing to just start off by walking through your leadership journey, your career story, just kind of bring the bio to life for us?
Yeah, sure. So straight out of my, getting my master's at WVU, I just needed to pay the bills, I think, like most people. And so at the time, I'm actually aging myself. I opened the paper and looked at the ad, and they were hiring for project managers, and for this company. At the time it was CLG, and went through the process and got the job at the very entry level position of project manager. And there was this point where I was working with these consultants, and I was really starting to understand what the business did and how they worked with organizations and leaders, that I was got curious, and I was I wonder, I'm really interested in that given my background, psych and, a minor in psychology and just my business background. And so started consulting a little bit on the side. Cool. And, some of my mentors, who I'll talk about a little bit later, introduced me to some clients, and I really enjoyed just the consulting work that we did and bringing the human element into business. And but I got to this point to where, and I remember it very vividly, I was sitting at a leadership table and they were talking about these business challenges. And I was I've never really been on that side of the table to where I've had to solve for some of those business challenges myself. And so I actually left consulting for a few years and went into the business and, got to geek out a little bit in different functions and just really learn what it meant to run a function and have a team and be accountable for, a budget and things like that. And then ultimately decided to go back to consulting, and because it was truly just something I was really passionate about. Yeah. And, just kind of worked my way through, different roles in different industries, within the consulting world.
Yeah. And that's cool too, because now you have that perspective of being both sides of the table and understanding, because I do think sometimes when you're in a consultant role, there could be individuals that say, well, you don't understand what it's like, you've not been in the business, or you don't work in this business. And now you can say, well, actually, I do. I maybe haven't sat exactly in your seat, but I understand where you're coming from and what some of those challenges are like.
It's so true. And it actually let me cross that barrier from being a consultant to an executive coach, because I could say, hey, I in my time or my tenure in this role, these are the things I experienced and this is what I did, or this is what I learned. And so it really opened the door for me to do something a bit more. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, well, I know you work with leaders, and we're going to be talking a lot about leadership today. Real quick, can you just give us a sense of what types of leaders you work with? I know there's different industries, but are we talking executive leaders, new leaders? Where do they fall on the spectrum there?
Yeah, a mix. So definitely new leaders coming into new roles or new organizations, but I'd say more senior type executive. I'm not at the front line anymore, even though that was like a lot of fun out there, you know, in the field. But I'd say mid to senior level leaders and some executives.
Okay, that's helpful, just for context purposes. All right, let's dive in. Tell me what your definition of leadership is.
So it's interesting because I really think leadership is just somebody's ability to guide, inspire, and influence people towards a common goal. And so I think it's easier to talk about leadership and what good leadership looks like, but it's a heck of a lot harder and more challenging to do it because I think we get lost in just the day-to-day work and the focus on just getting results that we really lose focus on how we go about getting the work done and the people component and element to it.
Yeah, that is a real struggle. And I think there's just lack of investment in learning the skills. That's my pain point that I feel like when I get on my leadership soapbox, it's usually about this is a skill, just like other skills, but it's not necessarily prioritized or taught the same way other skills are, and that makes it challenging.
I think so too, and there's a few other elements of leadership to that point that I think are really important. I think it's, you know, being able to make the tough decisions and stick to them even when it's unpopular, like being bold and courageous and taking the organization and the team somewhere different that they maybe weren't anticipating. You know, having tough conversations with people is another skill that I think is really important. And, you know, not pushing the challenge off to somebody else or another leader to solve for. And what I've really learned in my career is the more tough conversations I have, the better I get at it.
Yes, and the easier.
And the easier it becomes.
Is tough anymore. It's just like, okay, I've done this before, I've seen this movie before, and I know I'm going to be okay, and they're going to be okay too.
Yep, and approaching it with empathy and like putting yourself in their shoes, it just helps the conversation go much more smoothly. I think the other skill is, you know, if you're setting clear direction as a leader and you're hiring the right people who have the right skills to do the work, like really having trust and confidence in them to do the work is important so that you can continue to elevate yourself and be that strategic leader and not get into the day-to-day kind of management of the work.
That's interesting that you say that because I do feel like that's a pain point for a lot of folks in organizations at various levels. But hey, you hired me and you're paying me to do this job for the expertise that I bring to the table, but then you want to control every single element of how I do it, when I do it, where I do it. And it's frustrating for people because they don't have the autonomy to be able to do what they do best and the freedom and flexibility to bring those strengths to the table.
Absolutely. Yeah. And at ALULA, there are actually 5 leadership behaviors that we use with the leaders to help them sharpen their leadership skills.
Very cool.
And so I think that, you know, they are based on, you know, 30 years of research, and I'll talk about that in just a second. But I think in just today's world, where there's just so much change going on for leaders and there's just so much noise in the system, and you know, if you are overly indexing on the business results, if you can lean towards the people part of it and how you do work, it's 5 behaviors really that if you're, you know, dedicated to and focused on will really help you be, you know, more successful and help others kind of lead and navigate through the change. But so, you know, the 5 leadership behaviors come from one of the largest research studies on leadership effectiveness. And what Judy Kamaki, you can Google her and find out, like, you know, all the information about her research. But what she really wanted to learn and discover was what sets the best leaders apart from the rest. So the leaders who are balancing the business results with the engagement and, you know, creating an environment where people want to show up and do the work. She started at the senior most level of leaders across like all kinds of industries and really discovered that they were doing 5 things differently than the rest of leaders in the organization. And to test her observations, she went down to that mid-level leadership level and saw the same things.
Wow.
And so the data says that if leaders are consistently adopting, 85% of leaders are consistently adopting these 5 behaviors, teams and individuals work on the most work and are on the right work, right? and that the business gets results more quickly.
Perfect.
So they're working on the right
looking
things.
for anyway, right?
Yeah. And so those behaviors are set clear expectations.
I'm writing these down while you... Everyone, get a pen and paper. Set clear expectations.
Mm-hmm.
People need to know what they're doing.
Observe performance.
Okay.
Remove barriers.
Uh-huh.
Provide feedback, and coach.
I love it. I love it.
And so for set clear expectations, it's not just talking about what the vision is and where you're going, when you're going to go there, how you're going to get there, but it's the why. Like, why do we need to go there?
Yes.
Like, and how does your work contribute to that, so they can have that line of sight and make that connection to how you need to stay competitive as an organization, right? Mm-hmm. And then, so once you've set clear expectations on where you're going and why, then you get out there and you observe performance as a leader. Right. And that does two things. One, it kind of confirms and validates that I was clear as a leader. Like, I clearly set expectations.
Yes.
Because then I can see then that if leaders are doing it.
Yes.
And that sometimes is like a big gap and breakdown.
I agree.
And then the third one is remove barriers. So if you're out there, of course, you're going to see where people are getting stuck. And nobody likes to get stuck, to your point earlier.
Yeah.
And so you can have conversations about what's getting in the way. You can ask questions. And since you're out there, you can provide feedback. So if you're seeing the behaviors that you want to see, you can reinforce the heck out of them, right? And then provide constructive feedback if you're seeing behaviors that need a little tweaking.
Yes.
And then the best leaders, lastly, know how to take that conversation from like a feedback conversation to coaching it forward. So asking questions to really explore, like, could we have done this differently? Or, next time, could we have, thought about this differently? But so the research is, it's really interesting because the first two behaviors actually lay the foundation for the other three. Mm-hmm. So if you're not setting clear expectations and going out there, like, how do you remove barriers? Like, how do you provide? You're really having to rely on other people or other sources of information to figure out what's going on. Mm-hmm. And then the last thing that the research says is that the behaviors are actually contagious. So, the question that we ask everybody in like workshops and stuff is like, think about a time when, you have worked with like the best leader you ever had. Like, what were those
qualities
things
and characteristics?
Yeah.
Yes.
And so when people see leaders engaging in these 5 behaviors and they see that the impact that it's having not only on the organization to get results, but like on the people and the teams, they're more likely to engage in them themselves.
Yeah. It totally makes sense. And I feel like that setting clear expectations is such a domino for everything else, because I feel like people struggle a lot with the feedback conversations. They're either not giving enough feedback or not comfortable giving feedback. But I always try to explain that if you're very clear and you do a really good job with the expectations, then you're just giving feedback against the expectations. It's a lot harder to just be like, I don't like how Mindy's doing that. And do I say something to her? Well, what is it? What's wrong about what Mindy's doing or what Laura's doing? And have you told them? That's not what the expectation is. So there's so much that's wrapped up even in that first step that I do find that that's critical as well.
So in my work, I will say with the leaders that I work with in the organizations that I work with, there are pockets of excellence where some leaders do all 5 like pretty well and consistently. And then there's, I'd say the biggest gaps are probably 3 of the 5. So the first one being observed performance, just because of the way we work today. And, I have leaders who have teams who are like teams split across different states, different cities, different
maybe
office
even countries, time zones,
exactly.
all of that.
Exactly. So that makes it really hard to observe performance. And then the other 2, what you were saying is the feedback. Like, you have to take time to out of your day to give the feedback, be pinpointed about it and specific. And then the coaching. I think coaching just requires a different skill set.
It does. Yeah.
And so those are the 3 that I think leaders struggle with the most.
Yeah, I could see that. I think a lot of times I see feedback and coaching paired together in trainings where they're trying to teach both, or they're trying to teach feedback delivery as coaching. So it's more about here's how you correct someone's performance. You do it through coaching. And then my like little ICF bells go off and I'm like, that's actually not coaching.
It's just constructive feedback.
Constructive feedback. Actually just saying like, this is the goal that I need you to accomplish and you're not accomplishing it. That's not coaching.
No.
So it is a different skill set. And I do think a lot of times leaders feel, because I think, especially when you go from individual contributor to a leadership role for the first time, to me, that is a harder transition to make sometimes for folks because they don't understand their value as much in terms of like, well, what do I do here? So they take a lot of pride in that individual contributor role, and they are very clear on, I do this work and I get these results and I get rewarded for these results. Well, then it becomes, if you're a people leader, I'm now responsible for the results of others.
Yes.
And where does my role fall in that? And so I think sometimes a natural default is, well, I'll just be the problem solver, the fixer. I'll tell people how to do it. I'll tell people what to do. And the telling piece that's not coaching. Coaching is a completely different skill set, and it's a little bit more abstract, I will say. It does require just getting in a different headspace and a different mindset. But oh my gosh, the gifts that come with being able to use that skill, you're going to get such a better result overall out of the performance of your team if you're able to flex into that space.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I love these. I can talk to you all day just on these behaviors alone. So how do you, when you work with leaders, are you assessing them on these 5, or giving them training on these 5, or coaching on the 5? Is there a specific formula that you walk through with leaders related to the 5?
It's a good question. Maybe a little bit of both. I would say, I don't really do much training.
Yeah.
But when I am in coaching sessions, I do introduce the 5 leadership behaviors.
That's excellent.
Just to help them elevate their skills. But we do have assessments that we do use just to get a sense of like, where are they? Where does their team think they are? Or where is the leadership team themselves as a body? And then we can, show that, reflect that data back to them, and then show progress like throughout the engagement if they've made improvements along the way.
That's amazing. The other one that I do want to touch on before we leave this subject is the remove barriers, because I do think, again, going back to a leader trying to understand, where is my role now? Where do I add value? To me, that is a huge area where you can add value as a leader, is by identifying and removing barriers for people. And it does make people feel like they're having a tangible contribution, but at the same time, you're in a position as a leader where you can potentially influence those barriers to be removed. But to your point, if you don't know about them, if you aren't asking the right questions or finding out what they are, it is literally holding back and inhibiting performance of your team. And you're not going to get the results that you're looking for. I think that people miss that connection all the time. And there's a huge opportunity for leaders there.
And it's so frustrating, right? As an employee, it's like, I was hired to do this job. I have the skills to do this job, but there's just certain things in the system or the process or the way we're working that's getting in the way. And so leaders play a huge role. I mean, even if it's just having conversations and getting alignment with another leader, about how the team should be working together, or what their common goals are, or things like that can really help.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of times it's little things that become big things. I delivered a training, and it was very much more focused on the behavioral side. And someone spoke up and was like, it was basically like, I'm asking them to have these, coaching conversations with their team and talking through that. And they're like, we don't have printer paper for our printers. It was like something like that, like I get that you want us to be great coaches, but like we have these other like very specific things going on, like we can't, there's so much construction. We can't get to our workspace to even talk to our people. And I was like, oh, that's so interesting, because sometimes I do think it's business processes or business structures or just these like little obscure
environmental factors,
like really uncomfortable chairs. I don't know, but it's just like these little things like
matter to people.
Yeah, they seem really little or insignificant, but they're not. And it's just like, did you tell someone that there's no paper in the printer? Is someone working on that? Because I get it. Like it's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? I get like from a work perspective, you're probably not going to be as inclined to do some of these behaviors if we're still down here in terms of the barriers that exist.
Needs and necessities. Yeah,
exactly.
So funny.
All right. So thinking about just these leadership behaviors, I'm curious to hear how it impacts you, your leadership style. How would you describe your leadership style?
I learned very early on that not everything is about me.
Oh.
So, it really is about the success of others.
Yes.
Right. And so, yes, I have to show up my best and I have to be really tuned in, but I'm working in service of others and the organization.
Yeah.
And I remember working with my first team. I was so nervous. Like I think I was over preparing because I wanted to say all the right things and do all of the right things. And somebody told me, Mindy, this really isn't about you. It's about them. And I was like, oh yeah, light bulb.
Yeah. Oh, that makes it a lot easier, actually.
Right. So it really did calm me down and help me focus. And, I know that if people are performing at their best and they are enjoying what they're doing and they're happy coming to work and they're happy tackling the tough problems because they know how they're adding value, then I've done my job as a leader. And then that just like opens the door for me to do the 5 leadership behaviors, right? And set direction, give feedback when I need to, and let the people, my team take it from there and do what they need to do.
Something that when you said set direction and setting expectations, you said this earlier and I glossed over it, but I want to come back to it too, because I think this is another huge miss, is that sometimes I feel like organizations are really good with sharing the 30,000 foot view of like, here's our strategic plan for the next 5 years, which is great. But like as an employee, truly just trying to figure out what I'm supposed to be doing day in and day out, that's a big leap to make from my day-to-day job or wherever I fall in an organization to like this 5-year strategic plan. So I would love to hear any thoughts, tips, perspective you have on how pinpointed, I heard you use that word earlier, and I like that, how specific or how frequent maybe leaders should be setting those expectations. I agree. I think the why is another piece that's missed a lot, but even if you could share how you approach it with your team in terms of maybe even how frequently you're talking about the expectations or the direction, I think that might be a nice example to cover if you're willing to share that.
It's such a good question because I've observed that too. That's always what's missing between us. Like, oh, okay, I see the vision where we're going.
The vision.
But I don't understand how it really affects what I'm doing day in and day out. And so what I do and what I help leaders do is take the time to have that exact conversation.
I love it.
So when you show the vision or like the direction, you really talk about like, so what does that mean for the decisions that we're making every day, how we work with our contractors, our business partners, how we're showing up, the decisions that we're making day in and day out. Like, so if you have as an organization, you have to cut costs by X amount, maybe we don't bring in lunch every day anymore, right? Or, but there is definitely that direct line of sight and that you have to create for your people, but it happens through conversation.
Yes.
And getting very specific with examples.
Yes.
And then, talking that through. And what happens is if everybody's not doing that, that's sometimes where that cross-functional tension comes into place too. Because if you get one function moving towards that direction and they get and understand how that impacts their decisions and their work every day, and another function doesn't, then it can create, some disconnects.
Yeah, and you're hearing things from that's where the rumor mill, I feel like, gets really rampant too, because you're seeing gaps and you're hearing about different things, but your leader's not telling you or giving you that direction. You mentioned the cutting lunches, and I think that's a perfect example of things that happen when the why is not shared. And then people are just like, this was taken away from me and I liked it and I don't understand why it's gone. And is it ever coming back? And there's a whole snowball effect that comes from things like that.
Yeah.
Just as an example. It's interesting.
Yeah. But even, another example, related to that is like if within a function or a cross function, if you can find ways to optimize, like how maybe I used business partners as an example of optimizing how you're using one business partner, to help achieve a common goal.
Yes.
I mean, just having those conversations but you have to have the open mind and willingness to explore alternative ways of working. And regularly, right?
Yes.
Kind of challenging how you're working.
Yeah. And I think, this process kind of works as a circle. So to your point, you can look, when you start doing the observing, you're starting to see, if you're good at observing, then you'll be clear about, or you'll be able to see whether people understand what your expectations are and what the directions. Because if they're not going in the direction that you want them to go or the company wants them to go, then obviously it wasn't clear enough, right? And that provides an opportunity to have that conversation. So that probably can help dictate some of the frequency. I mean, that's more of a reactive standpoint than a proactive standpoint, but still that could be an opportunity to say, okay, clearly we're not all marching to the same beat of the drum here. So let's take a step back and revisit those expectations.
Yeah. And it kind of has to start at the top too. And when we get the opportunity and we can start at the top, we can outline what are the behaviors that the senior most leader that we're talking with needs to exhibit? What are the behaviors of the next level down? What are like the things that they need to be saying and doing differently? What are the reinforcers that they need to be providing to kind of get everybody moving in the right direction? But Laura, it's so true. I mean, you have to take you can't just roll something out and be like, okay, go do. Right? Like there has to be some thoughtfulness in like what you need from everybody.
And that observing is hard. To your point, there's so much more virtually being done now that it's like, how do you observe someone when really the only time you may even see them is through a video chat during a one-on-one or a team meeting or whatever, and the rest of the time they're just, doing their thing, you're just doing your thing, or to your point earlier, you're in different time zones, different states, different countries. I think that does add a layer of complexity, especially because I think that's an area where sometimes we rely on systems and software programs to do the observing for us, and it becomes more of a productivity. Is this person staying active and green on Teams all the time? And like using that as an observation tool versus actually engaging in the work that's required to really be able to see if they're doing what they're supposed to be doing and getting the results that everybody wants to get.
I don't know about you, but I'm still meeting people for the first time. Since COVID, and I know that that teams, a lot of leaders that I work with, still have members of their teams that they just are meeting, for the first time too. And so, it's hard. It's hard. Really hard. So.
Ugh. All right. That's a whole conversation for a different day. We'll have Mindy
Another
back.
challenge.
We'll have Mindy back to talk about how do you manage remote. But I want to hear from you because you have had a really successful career in within industry as well as within consulting. But if you think about where you started in your career, project manager, at the very, very beginning versus where you are now as a senior principal, I would just like to think or hear from you, what is something maybe that you believed earlier in your career or at the beginning that you think differently about now?
It's really that leaders have all the answers. I think so many times, especially early in my career, I thought, they always know best or they know what's right versus what we shouldn't be doing. And that's not necessarily always the case. And so I just want to encourage everybody that, we as leaders may not have all the answers. So do speak up and share your thoughts and ideas. And I was just with my team like last week, and we were talking about one particular. I can't even remember what the challenge was at this point, but it was so cool, Laura, because like everybody had a unique perspective and approach and idea for how we could go about challenging or solving for that challenge, and none of them were wrong or right. It was just really like it was a think tank, and just like, and so that's one of the things throughout my career that I think I've gotten really, really good at this point is I have a pool of thought partners and people that I just love bouncing things off of and testing things with them. And it just adds to just the level of, diversity of thinking and thought and just, solutions that you can come up with. And so, just because we're in more senior roles and we, have more experience doesn't necessarily mean that we have seen this movie before. I mean, in most cases, we probably have seen the movie before at this time, point. But sometimes, with the pace and just which the world is moving and just the nature of just organizational challenges that people are facing, there's all kinds of different solutions to a problem.
Well, and I love that because you can see it from both perspectives. So if I'm reporting to a leader, it's a good message to hear that I shouldn't expect necessarily that my leader is just going to know the right answer and tell me what to do in all situations. And I think probably when I first started out, I had that expectation of like, well, I don't know what I'm doing. So, I mean, they clearly must know. So I'm just going to ask them how to solve all my problems. So it's a good message to hear from someone who's reporting to a leader to say, bring forth your ideas, your suggestions, your solutions. Don't assume that leader just whips out an answer to like,
my manual.
Let me take that book off the shelf. Oh, you have this problem? Yes, right here. This is what we do about it. But then also on the flip side of it, from a leadership perspective, first of all, that I would hope takes some pressure off of leaders, that you don't have to know all the answers and you don't have to be everything to everyone. But also there can be a little bit of a feeling of insecurity in that too. So I would say some leaders might not feel comfortable because they maybe prefer more of a hierarchical, because I am in this leadership role, I'm not going to partner side by side with you to invite you to share your thoughts and your feedback and your opinion. I'm the leader for a reason. And so I think it's a really good message for leaders to hear as well, that wait a second, going back to what we said earlier, you've hired brilliant people who are talented. You're paying them well probably to do their job. Why not ask them their suggestions, their ideas, their opinions, and you're going to get way more engagement and buy-in and ownership out of that too.
And one organization that I was working with, it was just a best practice. They're like, don't come to me with just the problem. Come to me with the problem and at least 2 to 3 solutions and approaches. And then the leadership team could talk about, they could debate, the options and the approaches that they could take. But it really helps, I think, build maybe that coaching muscle, right? Because if you're actually challenging yourself to think about like how could we approach this differently or do this differently than what we did last time? It's a really good opportunity for the team to develop.
Well, and all of that thinking and discussing and debating, you're going to get a higher quality end result because of the time invested in that. Instead of just like one person coming up with a solution or, one person bringing a problem and the other person coming up with a solution, all that time, and it doesn't have to take a lot of time, but the investment in actually thinking through, how could we do this differently? What are our options? And then following all of those little trails. Well, if we did this, what happens here? If we did this, what happens here? Being able to actually take time to ponder that instead of just, all right, we're just going to do this. Yeah, exactly. Like put the fire out as quickly as we possibly can and then move on to the next one.
I love that.
You're going to get a much better quality decision from that. So, well, I know you have worked a lot as a leader and you're working with leaders. So what leadership lessons or wisdom do you have to share for all of our leaders that are listening right
now? So this is actually just hot off the press. I'd say in the last 6 months, I've been working with a lot of leaders that are just transitioning to new roles, whether they're being promoted or new organizations, if they're trying something new and different. And so my advice to those leaders or any leader who might be coming into a situation like that is just, you know that saying, go slow to go fast?
Yes.
Take the time in your first, 30 days, I think is what we typically, recommend. But it could be, given the culture, could be a bit shorter. But really take the time to learn the culture that you're walking into.
Yes.
What maybe you thought was the culture may not actually be the culture. You and I have talked about that before. But get to know the team that you're inheriting.
Yes.
Right? Get to know the people, build the relationships. Lord only knows when you're going to have to lean on those relationships at some point, right? But really understand the business challenges, the team challenges, so that you can figure out and be really planful and thoughtful about where can I have some early wins to just unstick some things.
Yes.
And then where do I have more time to tackle the larger, hairier, uglier kind of challenges where I can be more thoughtful about who are the key people I need to involve, how do I need to involve them. And so I just really encourage leaders to be thoughtful about the new team, the role, the organization, so that they can establish their brand from the beginning. Like, how do you want to be known in this company, in this organization? And what type of leader do you want to be for this team? Like, figure all that out because you're given that grace.
You are. You're not expected to just walk in and produce these golden eggs on day one. But I think people think they are.
Well, and you know what else I'm seeing is like less and less of actually is earlier in my career, a lot of leaders want to leave their mark.
Yes.
They come in early and they're like, I'm just going to, this is the reputation that I want to leave behind. But now there's more younger leaders in more senior roles and they know they have a longer runway in front of them.
Yes.
So it's less about them leaving their mark and more consideration going into, what do we need to just stay the course on? Like, you've got it figured out. You're doing great. Let's just, let this continue. And then I can really turn to and address like some of the bigger issues and challenges that we have.
And just like finding my way. I love that you brought up leadership brand because that is not something that's talked about enough.
Yeah.
And you're right. Really taking some time to craft not only how can I add value to this organization, but what do I want to be known for? How do I want to show up as a leader? We can be intentional about that.
Yeah.
We can decide how we want to act as a leader, how we're going to demonstrate leadership behaviors. And when you're listening and learning in those first 30 days or however many days, that data that you collect is so helpful in terms of building what you want that leadership brand to be. And I love that. I love that advice too, because I think that is huge.
Now, and you know this because of the insights, the training, and I think you do e-colors, or is it e-color? That there's different stressors in our environments that draw out different behaviors. And I'll talk about this a little bit later. But, it's important for people to know what your intentions are and who you are from the beginning, because when things get tough, when times get really tough, there might be some things that they see, some behaviors that they see that are not the norm.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And there's a little bit more empathy and probably forgiveness when those things happen.
Yeah, that's so true. You're right. Yeah, when I do insights training, we talk about, okay, here's what each of the color energies, what their gifts are on a good day. And then we do talk about on a not so good day. Because you're right. A lot of times when we are under stress, the first thing that comes to mind is not, gee, I wonder how I'm showing up to everyone right now, right? So we are likely exhibiting less than desirable behaviors, but we're not consciously aware of it because we're so focused on whatever it is that's stressing us out. And so you're right. If someone doesn't have the benefit of having built a relationship day in and day out, like what if that's your first experience with me is a very bad day for me? And you're like, oh. Or if you have such limited opportunities to interact with me that the only time you hear from me is when I have some negative news to share, or again, something blew up, there's a problem, you know, that's the only time you hear from me, then you start to build a perception of who I am. And in your mind, there is an entire leadership brand built around me based on my worst day behaviors, as opposed to again, the benefit of having built that relationship, having those different data points to collect along the way, then when I see those behaviors, I can recognize, oh, okay, you know what? That is not his usual behavior or her usual behavior. They are clearly like, there's something going on, and it's not necessarily because of me or something I did wrong or whatever, but finding out, and that's where I think being a good colleague comes into play also.
Totally
is instead of assigning judgment to someone who is showing those bad day behaviors, saying, clearly it looks like this is someone who probably could use some extra support right now because they maybe have something going on, personally or professionally or both.
Yeah. And that's why building those trusted relationships from the beginning is so important, because, you know, other people can be your best advocates or your worst in those situations.
Yes. Yeah. There's a lot of power there behind the scenes where people influence other people's perceptions. Yeah. You're absolutely right. Well, let's switch to, because I one of the reasons that I was most excited about, there's a lot of reasons I'm excited about having you here today, but one of the reasons I'm most excited about having you here is because you do sit in that unique position where you're going in and out of multiple organizations, multiple industries, and I'm always interested in patterns and trends and looking for things like that. And I want to just hear, as you're going across industries and organizations, are there certain trends that you are seeing across versus, you know, just very specific things that one organization or one industry in particular is dealing with? But what trends do exist, if any, that you're seeing across organizations or across leaders that you're working with right now?
Yeah, two in particular come to mind. The first one being psychological safety and just lack of trust within organizations. And that more specifically is people feeling like they cannot speak up, voice their opinions and thoughts freely without fear of something.
Yes.
Right? And so I'm not sure if that's something that you've even experienced in your work.
Yes, I am seeing that a lot as well.
So one of the things that I like to use with the leaders I'm working with on this one is, and you can Google this again, this is not original thought material. It's the trust equation.
Oh.
And so it's like a math equation. And so what it describes is that trust is made up of certain elements. So it's credibility plus reliability.
I'm writing this down. Keep going.
Plus intimacy divided by or over self-orientation. Now, I think between you and I, credibility and reliability is pretty straightforward.
Yes.
Okay. The other two, intimacy, it really comes down to how much you let people see of you, how much they can relate to you, like how real you are.
How real you are,
right?
Authentic.
Warmth.
Yes.
Right?
We're supposed to be warm in the workplace, Mindy?
I think so. And if people feel like they can get close to you, right?
Yeah, and you don't have to be their best friend.
No.
Yeah.
You're human.
Yes.
Like,
not
can
a
you
robot.
show that as a human being?
Yes, not a robot. We are emotional beings.
Yes. And then self-orientation is the ego part. And so what are you making decisions as a leader for your own benefit or the benefit of the larger team, organization? Are you as a leader using a lot of I statements?
Yeah.
You know, getting back to the stress point we were talking about earlier, that's where that will show up too. So if you're under stress, your self-orientation will shift a little bit. And I tell leaders in those moments, whether it's personal or professional, as comfortable as you are, sharing as little or as much as you want, like giving people some insight into what's going on might be helpful because your self-orientation might shift a little. But yeah, so that's the trust equation. And I like leaders to go through it and say, okay, so where are you? Where do you think you're strong? Do the math. Like, where are you strong? Where do you have some opportunity? And then test it with others. Like, test it with your team and see if there's maybe a blind spot or something.
Yeah. Well, that is a psychological safety test in and of itself, right? Because if you're, I don't know how you ask them to actually test it, but if you're trying to invite feedback, the level of openness and honesty people are willing to give back to you should be telling in terms of also your, if you're like, you're great, everything's fine.
Nothing here.
Nothing. You don't need to work on anything. All these are stunning for you. That's a good test right there.
That's one of the nice things about being a consultant sometimes too, is people are really, they tend to be more honest with you than maybe
so.
their
I always
manager.
tell people I feel like I'm a priest, and it's just like, I don't know, they just tell me everything. And again, the benefit of having an HR background as well is that it goes into the vault, and maybe that's why they know they can just tell me whatever. But you're right, there's sometimes just an instant comfort level with a stranger or someone who's external to the organization, because they don't feel like we have the ability to influence their pay, their employability, those factors. Yeah.
So we even can go out and ask, teams like those questions. Like,
we can.
Let's test where the level of trust is, like really high and low, and then you can ask the follow-up questions to see like where it's really coming from. But
I think that self-orientation is big as well. I talk a lot about my son, he plays baseball. I talk a lot about that on this podcast, but I observed something with him, and I shared with him, I said, listen, when you're not playing well, you become about you. So all of a sudden, you're not congratulating your other teammates for the things that they're doing and the contributions they're making. Your body language changes. You go inward and you're just focused on yourself and your own performance. And that's not being a good teammate. That's not what this is about. And you need to focus on how you can still make a contribution. We're all going to have bad days, off days, whatever. Those are the times you need to be even the most externally oriented. So get out of your own head, stop thinking about yourself, and focus, double down on encouraging others, because, okay, you're having a bad day. You're clearly not contributing much from a performance perspective. Fine. Focus on how you can contribute in other ways. And maybe it's, I'm just going to be a really good encourager of everybody else on this team right now because I'm kind of not bringing it at the plate, or whatever it is, But that's not the time to go within. That's when you should be even more externally focused. But it's just human nature. That is our default, especially with those stressors, is that we just become, I think, even more self-oriented in those situations.
By the way, that's great coaching on your part.
Thank you. I don't know if he would agree with that, but thank you.
But we have a choice, right? Yes. Like, we have a choice of how we're going to deal with that information or deal with that situation. And either you show up, to your point, and help others, or you like kind of go inward.
Make it about me. And I think layoffs, another situation. I always feel like it's like an episode of Survivor when companies start going through
every
layoffs.
Man for himself.
Exactly. And it just becomes self-preservation, right? And so that's another situation a lot of times where I feel like that self-orientation goes up. And so I love the math equation. I don't love math necessarily, but I love the equation because you're right. You can really start analyzing where I have, this is simple enough math that I can do it. But it has you can really measure from more of a technical mathematical perspective where you have strengths and where you have challenges. Okay, what else? What else are you seeing?
So burnout and fatigue is another big one. Big. Let's be honest. To stay competitive, organizations have to change.
Yes.
Right? There has to be a level of change, otherwise you're going to be left behind.
Yes.
But we're human.
Yes.
And we're being asked to do more and more with less and less, every day.
Yes, we are.
And so, and leaders just don't know what to do about it. Like, they know it's a problem.
They're probably burnout too.
Yeah, absolutely. And so one of the things that I also learned early in my career was that people will take what you allow them to take.
Yes. People will take what you allow them to take. Yes.
And so all of our situations are so different, right? Like, I can set certain boundaries for myself. You could set very different boundaries for yourself. But some of the leaders I work with, they're okay booting up after dinner, sending some emails to catch up.
Yeah.
They're even okay with sending some stuff over the weekend.
Yes.
But other leaders they have other obligations and commitments that they just can't do that. And so my advice is set those boundaries early and, stick with them.
Yes.
Right? Don't let somebody take more than what you're willing to give. But I mean, that's in this crazy world with just so much and the pace at which the world is changing and that we're having to work. Like you just have to be really kind to yourself, respectful to yourself, and know your limitations.
Well, I was just going to say, know yourself.
Yeah.
Know what you're willing to. I agree. I could not agree more that at the end of the day, it becomes a decision that every one of us has to make in terms of, is this still the right environment for me? Because with the change, the rules of the game change. And I think a lot of times people find themselves in situations where they say, this isn't what I signed up for. I know someone who immediately after starting her job, like literally a week or two later, her boss quit and they didn't replace the position. So guess what happens? Now she has this total scope creep with her role. She's not being paid more for it, but she's and she's still trying to assimilate she's been there a week, she's trying to assimilate to the organization. And suddenly there's all these other demands placed on her. And so the rules of the game change. This wasn't what she signed up for. And it becomes that decision point of, am I still okay with this? What am I okay with? Those boundary lines are huge. What am I willing to do? What am I not willing to do? And then we have to start making that choice for ourselves of, how do I want to move forward? Because I think sometimes the challenge is we just say, you need to make it right, company or leader. You need to make this right for me. It's not work. This isn't working for me, and you need to make it right. And it's like,
but I, kind of own that too.
Yeah.
That, what that actually brings up a really good point too, is I don't think that we should be afraid to go back to the table and renegotiate.
Yes.
I mean, especially in that situation.
Yes.
I mean, I would be going back and renegotiating the conditions of.
Right.
Like,
pretty sure the offer letter I just got a week ago said that this was my title and these were my responsibilities.
Oh,
but it happens because you're right. Do more with less, do more with less. And so you get in these situations all the time where suddenly this position was eliminated. Some of the duties just kind of got balanced out amongst the rest of the team. And it's like, well, wait a second. Now I'm working a lot more.
And you know what? Hey, I'm the first person that will take one for the team.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'll be like, hey, I know there's a huge need here for the business, and I'm willing to fill that gap.
Yes.
But you need, again, setting some guardrails and boundaries around how much are you willing to invest in that situation until it improves.
Yes.
And then you can, move on to where you need to go. But I think like just being thoughtful about those types of things are really important.
Well, and I like that you said take one for the team, because to me that indicates temporary. And I feel like there's a lot of different definitions of burnout, but the one that I think is simplest and easiest to understand is just more about those prolonged periods of stress. And so I do think sometimes that's the challenge, where people just don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. It's like, is this ever going to get better? Is it ever? So like recognizing that if this is more of a temporary thing, I think from a leadership perspective, being able to communicate that to people. Hey, I know it's really tough right now. The next few months are going to probably be really tough too. We really appreciate if you can hang in there. We recognize we're asking a lot of you. However, the expectation is that in such and such time, and I think we're scared to do that because we don't know if we can make those promises or not, that it is going to get better.
And I was thinking too, I think we also should reevaluate what performance kind of looks like. Like if you're a high performer and like you're used to performing at this level all the time and you know that you're in a situation for long term, then I think your performance level needs to be, leveled out a little bit so that you can still perform at high levels but not put so much stress on yourself to always be at peak.
Right.
Peak performance.
It's just not realistic.
You can still be at a high performer.
Yeah.
And a very good performer.
Yeah.
But like allow yourself some room to like, ebb and flow within that high performing space so that you're not just like always at going 100 miles an hour.
Yes, you're right. Especially because that's going to lead to you're burning yourself out in that scenario if you're setting those standards or those expectations for yourself too high.
And we do a lot.
Yes, I agree with you. Oh yeah, burnout and fatigue.
You know, the whole 80-20, like, you know what, this might be a situation where like 80% is fine. And then I can move on to something else.
Yeah, knock it out over here. But you're right, because motivation levels aren't at the same every single day. When we wake up, you know, there's some days where I feel great when I wake up, and some days I'm like, did not get enough sleep last night. This is going to be a challenge. And that's going to probably impact my performance for the day. So am I going to beat myself up, or am I just going to say, all right, today I'm probably going to be performing down here. I'm going to do the best I can. And then tomorrow, you know, maybe it goes back up to here again.
Are you on TikTok at all? Do you
watch a little bit.
Have you seen those TikToks where it's like the inner monologue becomes like the outer monologue?
When the I'm gonna need to watch those.
An email from somebody comes in, and it's just like, it's so funny. But that's what you don't want. Like that. Those are the types of environments that you don't want to create. So I think all the things we're talking about can really help about setting clear, you know, guardrails. Set like maybe reassessing like the level of, you know, attention and time and detail you're going to put into certain things versus others, right?
Yeah, and from a leadership or corporate perspective, respect people's boundaries too, because I do feel like I was just having this conversation last night. When the pandemic first started, the lockdown happened, I think boundary lines got really blurred. And we kind of took advantage, you know, it was like, well, if you're not doing anything tonight, would you be willing to work on this report? And it's like, what am I going to be doing? Nothing. We're not allowed to go anywhere or do it. Like, okay, I'll work on the report. But it's like those boundary lines got really blurry, and I'm not sure that they've come back as much. And so I do think for ourselves, we need to know what those boundary lines are, but also from a leadership, corporate perspective, we need to also respect that there are boundary lines and have that conversation as well. And are you okay with them or not? I mean, it's that negotiation process.
That's right.
If this is my boundary line and this is what the company expects over here, and we have a delta,
we have
to talk about that delta. It's not necessarily that I'm right, you're wrong because of it, but that is a conversation that needs to happen. Regardless.
Well said.
Love it. Okay, what else? Anything else? Anything we've left on the table that we haven't talked about today?
I don't think so.
Been awesome, Mindy.
It has. Thank you.
I have enjoyed this so much. I'm going to make you come back if you don't mind.
Okay, I'm happy to come back.
All right, awesome. Because I feel like there's just so many more things we can explore.
We can do a deep dive into.
On a lot of different topics. But again, I think you do amazing work, and I'm grateful that you took the time to talk through it with everyone today. Just share a little bit of snippets of your world and the work that you do to support leaders, because it's important work.
This was fun. Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. All right, everyone, that's all the time we have for today. Until next time, shine bright, everyone. Oh, I forgot the lightning round. Wait, we have to do the lightning round. Stop. I'll sign it off again. Yeah, rewind. Wait a second. Okay, lightning round. I can't believe it. Can't believe I almost forgot. All right, lightning round is 60 seconds to answer as many open-ended questions about yourself as you can. Okay.
I'm ready.
Mark, get set, go. What season best fits your personality?
Spring.
Okay. What's your most used emoji in text?
Wink.
I love it. What book, song, movie, or podcast has had the greatest impact on your life?
Oh, this one.
Oh, yes! I love it. Okay, fan favorite. What's something about you that surprises people when they first hear it?
Oh, I'm from northern Minnesota because I don't have
the accent, except when you said Minnesota.
Minnesota.
Fill in the blank. I spend too much money on.
Oh, handbags.
Ooh, yeah. What celebrity would you want to play you in a movie?
Oh.
Can I suggest one?
Yeah.
Kate Hudson.
Oh, I love Kate Hudson.
Yeah, she'd be good for you. Okay. What is your favorite room in your house?
I have a hearth room in my bedroom, and I love it. It's just so cozy.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah. Okay. If you catch me by the fridge at night, I'm probably sneaking what out of the fridge? Keep going. You can finish that.
What am I sneaking? Probably like leftovers from dinner or something. I'm like reeating.
Yeah. That was really good. Let's try that again. You went through, I have to tell you, like you got very Yeah, focus. That was impressive. You got through
Challenge
a lot of questions.
accepted.
Yeah, thank you so much. This has been awesome. Thank you. And we're going to have you back.
Okay.
All right. That's all the time we have on Leadership Rediscovered today. Until next time, shine bright, everyone.